Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
The one and only.
Yes, and look what I'm sitting in.
I know, we splurged. It's only been 2 years.
That's okay.
We're on episode 102 and we finally got you a chair.
It feels weird though. I feel like I don't know. It feels weird.
We need to put your name on it. Do not disturb. Clara sits here.
Wonderful. That would be awesome.
So on this episode, we are going to follow up on our previous episode where we talked about spouses of abusers and some of the things that they go through. I know you received a lot of private messages. I received a lot of private messages.
I have not been able to answer all of them yet. So if you are one who sent me a message, please bear with me. I'm still responding. I had an inbox that was totally full.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I think it just shows how big of a need there is for this. There is an absolute, very big need for resources to be out there for spouses of abusers.
Right.
Kind of the people who I think are kind of an afterthought in the midst of abuse.
Right. The focus is on the abused, the abused survivor, not on the spouse of the abuser.
Or on the abuser.
A
lot of times people rally around the abuser.
Right.
And so we just we wanted to spend this episode and talk about the healing aspect of it.
Right.
So, how do you find healing? What does healing look like? I hear that word thrown around a lot, and I think we just kind of generally throw it out there. Well, either I healed or you need to heal, right?
Yes.
But what does healing look like? And I think that's probably very different for everybody.
It is, and healing is a process. I always explain that to people. Healing isn't something that is a goal and you reach it and that's it. Then automatically you're healed.
Right.
Healing is a journey. It's a process. It takes time. And I don't know that there's ever that magical moment where you look up and say, wow, I'm healed. It's a continuum of different things happening, excuse me, till you get to that point in your life where you can finally say, you know what, things are feeling better. I'm getting along better. This feels okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about last week that there are three main areas that need healing. The first being spiritual, and then there's the mental, emotional, and then there's the very physical. We talked about the financial needs, which often is totally overlooked when a spouse leaves the abuser to protect children. Basically, that's what happens. And the spiritual, I mentioned, is so necessary because without that foundation, we're kind of lost. We're left weak and lost and lonely. And often we don't find that spiritual healing, if we want to call it that, within the confines of a church building.
Yeah. Well, I think too, we see this every single day, but within the confines of a religious community inside the church building oftentimes is the total opposite of spiritual healing. You find spiritual bruising.
Right.
You find people who, even if they mean well, they're just inflicting these spiritual bruises on you and making matters so much worse.
Absolutely. And often the abuser, and you'll have to excuse my voice because every time I get in this office, my allergies kick up. I took Claritin. Anybody else have
We have mold. No, just kidding. No.
Okay. Well,
Maybe you're allergic to me.
No, it's no.
It's not my house. It's
you-
every time I come
that
around.
could be, Jimmy. That could be. Huh. But anyway, often the abuser has built up his surrounding cheerleaders, as I like to call it. Abusers are quite often loved, and we've talked about that in episode after episode after episode. Then you have the spouse of the abuser who has quietly been in the background most often, afraid to speak up for fear of not being believed, not being heard, or being punished in some way by being told, your job is to forgive and move
Yeah.
on, stick by your mate no matter what. You took vows, and on and on and on. So you're right. Often the church family is not the place we go for spiritual healing, sadly. It was not for me, actually. And my healing came about in that area, and it's still coming about by different means. Number one, I had to refocus and put myself into the scriptures and relearn who God was.
But you did go, just for the audience, you did go to church for a while
I did.
after,
I did. For a good while.
after this happened.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
eventually, that kind of trickled down, or maybe you just stopped altogether. I don't really know, because we've not talked about this a
right.
lot.
It was a trickle down, and the reason being it got really strange because people would come up to me because we were in the newspaper so much. Our family was at that point in time. And they had the most bizarre comments, and I would feel myself beginning to shake before I even entered the building, because I knew that after that service, I was going to have a group of people asking questions. What was it like? I can't believe it. What's going on with your kids? Where are you living now? Are you in your home? And on and on and on. And at that point, I just didn't feel like I was able to answer questions. And so it was better for me to withdraw for a while. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
But I had to relearn basically who God was in my life.
Well, yeah, because you talked last week about your identity was wrapped up in being the preacher's wife. You were.
That's who I was.
You were known not as Clara the Christian, but you were known as Clara the the preacher's wife. And your whole identity for most of your life was wrapped up in that. It was.
And by the way, I loved that identity. It was very difficult. There were two identities that I loved. I loved being a wife, and I loved being a preacher's wife. I truly did. I loved everything about it, for the most part.
Yeah.
And, I loved teaching Bible classes. I loved doing the church bulletin. I did that for how many years? I loved all those things. But that identity was stripped away when I removed myself from the abuser.
So how did you relearn to lean into God, to find community? Or have you found community within the religious realm?
I have. And it's a process, and I'm still learning that process 8 years later. We went from 2012 to 2020 is 8 years later, and I'm just now getting where I feel like I have a foothold, where I have a strong foundation again with God. For a while, I couldn't pray. I wanted people to pray for me. But unfortunately, the bulk of my friends were not Christians in the fact that they worshiped at the same place where I did. But I have reconnected with a lot of my Christian friends, and I'm not afraid now to say, hey, I need some prayers this week. It's going to be a hard week or whatever. Will you pray for me? And I connected in that way. I've reconnected with God in that I got back in God's Word, which I needed to do. I've reconnected on Facebook with some awesome people, and made some new friends. Yeah. Porch Swing Ministries, I'll get a plug in there, has been wonderful.
Yeah, and that was, if you listeners haven't heard the episode where we interviewed Christine Parker, go back and listen to that. Please because do. That's what Porch Swing Ministries is all about. And I think it just, stripping people of that guilt. of saying you have to go inside of a church
Right.
building or else your faith somehow is
Yes.
not valid. Somehow you're less than Christian, or you're not a Christian.
It's a
You're not
horrible.
faithful. I hate that term.
Yes.
Faithful Christian
Yes.
as applied to people who go to church,
Yes.
because that's just kind of this generic term that says if you go to church, you're a good little boy or girl, and if you don't go to
just
church, then you're not faithful.
Yes. Right.
And I just have come to really despise that term when it's applied that way.
And I appreciate you for speaking, you being a minister, to speak and say that. I've
I've encouraged people to leave when
have.
church hurts
Yes.
them.
Right.
Because I look, scripturally, I look at all the times when Jesus told people to go, they were begging to follow him. And certain people, he demanded that they follow him.
Right.
Not demanded, but, said,
they had to. They were called to
said
do
that,
Yes.
there's a big cost in following me.
There is.
And he would call certain people to follow him. Other people begged him to follow.
Yeah.
They said, we want to follow you.
Right.
And he said, no,
Right.
go home and be with your family.
Yes. And
Or go be in peace. Go in
Yes.
peace. And he sent people away to their homes. He wasn't sending them into synagogues. He wasn't saying, you need to be a good Christian and go to synagogue. He was sending people home who were very badly wounded to be with their families where they belonged.
I am so appreciative of you saying that, because that's basically what I did. I withdrew to home with family, with those closest to me, and allowed that to begin to heal my heart.
Yeah.
And until I had that, got to where I felt like I had that relationship again with God. And believe me, we need that relationship, but we don't need to be wounded more.
Yeah.
So it's finding that place where you can do that portion of healing, of spiritual healing. Thankfully, ones like the Somerset Church also, where you minister, the online service is so encouraging to me and to actually thousands of others.
And we really try to make it a point to say this, the online part is specifically for people
Yes.
who can't step inside of a church
Yes.
building. We want them to have community. We want them to feel like
Right.
and to know that they're valued Christians. That, just because they're at home watching worship online doesn't mean that they're not any less a part of the body than the rest of us.
Not at all. And I
They
know,
very much are.
Yes, and I appreciate that so much, because you have brought about the church, the Somerset Church, healing for many. Continue to do that. For me to step into that building is really difficult yet.
Yeah.
That's where I was the preacher's wife for so many years, the largest portion of my life. I saw your dad standing where you are, and listened to him and cherished the words he said. And it's really difficult to shed that part of me and put on the new yet, but I can do it online in the privacy of my home, and I so appreciate that. So I urge each person who is feeling this spiritual deprivation, whatever you want to call it, this spiritual emptiness, find your place. Start seeking and find it. Look online. Go to your Bible. Seek out your Christian friends. Each of us has friends within the church that we know will support us, and begin there. Take little steps and begin there. Mentally and emotionally, that's really hard to find a lot of support at first, because we are so weak and in such dire need that I know I felt totally zero empty. If you recall, I went into almost a total shutdown for a period of probably 2 to 3 years, where I basically talked to no one. I had very little to say because I couldn't. Inside, I felt like I was bleeding, just bleeding constantly. And that bleeding hurt so bad. There was just nothing there but pain. And so you need that help, but you don't know where to get it or how to get it. So how did I get it? Again, it's a journey. It's a step by step journey. I learned along that way to voice the word help.
Yeah.
And that was a tough word for me. It still is. I don't like to ask for help, as you know.
Yep. I know where I get it from. I hate it too.
You are a chip off the old block. You truly are. For some of us, it's very hard to say, I need some help today, or I need help this week, or I need help in my life. And I'm not one to ask somebody to come sit physically alongside of me. I do my crying and my weeping privately, which
I think part of that, at least for me, is in doing that, it makes me feel like I'm robbing attention away from other people who are
right.
They're despondent and they need help, and I'm calling people away to sit with me. And who am I to ask for help when there are so many people who have it worse off than me? That's just what goes through my mind.
Well, me too. I've always been the nurturer. I wanted to be my name. I wanted to be the encourager. And within when I was preacher's wife and for all those years, that's what I wanted to be known as.
Yeah.
The person who encouraged others. But I found myself sitting in the ash heap, needing encouragement. And I found it very interestingly among 4 friends who were not church friends, just everyday people who treated me normal.
Yeah.
In the midst of all that chaos. And honestly, that did more for me at that point in my life than anybody will ever know. They asked no questions about my personal life. They didn't stick their nose where it didn't need to be. They just invited me to be with them.
That brings up a really interesting point, because
I could tell you were thinking.
I know. Well, I wonder how many times we're well-intentioned and we go out of our way to coddle people and to ask them how they're doing, and the big pause and no, how are you really doing?
Questions.
Yeah, and that can be really invasive for somebody who just wants to feel like a normal person again.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that's interesting when you have friends who can read you.
Yes.
And I can guarantee that you have no doubt for their love and their care for you.
Yes.
About you being wounded in this area.
I knew that they knew.
But they don't have to bring it up. Like, they make you feel normal. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I just wanted to feel normal again. I had been stripped of so much, and then when your brother, my son Mike, died, that was even more was ripped from me. These same people invited me on a beach trip. They said, hey, we're going to the beach. You're coming with us.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to. They said, but you are. You'll be good. You like to walk along the beach. You do your own thing. We'll do our thing. You just come. That's all you have to do. I went, and a portion of me healed.
Yeah.
I needed that. They didn't preach to me. They didn't ask questions. They didn't probe into my life. But I knew they were there if I needed something.
That's part of the problem, too. I think sometimes people feel like they have to fix other people. Like, it's really uncomfortable to know that people close to us are grieving. Yes, and so then I feel like that's when out come these cliches and all these, here's what you need to do. You need to go pray, or you need to just go find a lonely place, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And we give this laundry list to people who sometimes what they really need is for you just to be there and just smile and be yourself.
Yes.
And let them be themselves.
It felt good to have some laughter. I remember the first time that I laughed after your dad had been sent to prison. It's like I went home that night and I thought, wow, I had dinner with friends and I actually laughed, and it felt so good just to feel that feeling. So that emotional healing comes about in odd and strange ways, different ways for each of us. But I would say everybody has at least 1 or 2 good friends, sometimes more. We're lucky if we have more. And just let them know you just need to be with them, not all the time, not where it's making you uncomfortable, but just to be normal. Just treat you normal.
Yeah, I think the best Christian friends or just the best friends. In your case,
in my
they
case,
don't have
wasn't
to be.
from my family of God.
The best friends that you can have are not people who look for all the things that you have to change about yourself to
Right.
heal.
Yes.
Like I think
True.
we get caught in those traps
Yes.
where it's like, oh my goodness, as a Christian, it's my duty to show you where your bitterness is,
Yes.
to show you, which by the way, I want to do an episode on bitterness.
That will be great.
Telling people that they don't need to be bitter, I think
Yes.
is not a really helpful thing.
Thank
You should be bitter over what was done to you.
I call it righteous anger. And I've done a series of videos with my grief group on that. I just finished it. There's a time when it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there are, I mean, plenty of scriptures where people cry out in bitterness to God.
Yes.
That's okay.
Sure, it
So
is.
anyway, that's kind of an aside, but yeah, I really love that. I love this idea of finding friends who they just let you be yourself. And
did I say some things that now I look back and I think, whoa, I can't believe I said that. I did.
It's part of the processing, though.
It's part of the process. They never blinked an eye. Just went on, we were playing cards, I remember, and just the conversation continued. They let me be me and voice my grief and my pain as I needed to.
Yeah.
So that's where I think how the mental and emotional healing will come about. And by the way, I think that's good to do with our children who have been abused also. As a parent, I don't know the words to say. I just don't have the words. But to let your children express their pain and to have them know you're still there is what we need to do for them too. Yeah. That brings about healing.
And to let them know that the abuse hasn't changed who you are as a person.
Exactly.
Because I often wonder what children go through when their parents are always, in this mode of, oh, honey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, honey, what can I do for you? Again, oh, honey, and they're always smothering them.
Yes. Treat them with some normalcy, too.
Yeah, let them be kids. Let them be normal.
The abuse was part of their lives, yes, but it's only part of their lives. There are a lot more parts to it than that. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And Jimmy, I love that phrase you said, sometimes we try to fix people. That is not our job at all.
No.
So I appreciated you saying that. I appreciated people who didn't come to me and try to fix me. That was part of my healing. And last of all, the physical needs. This is really practical stuff. I'm not talking about physical intimacy, physical companionship, anything like that. That would be a whole different segment. The loneliness of no longer having a spouse, whatnot. But how do you adapt? What goes on? How do you pick up those pieces? That's different. But this is very real. It's like, where am I going to live? How am I going to pay the bills type of stuff? How am I going to feed the kids? For me, one of the first things I did, and I found it so doggone hard to do, was I marched myself up to the president of our bank. I didn't think I had the courage to do it. And believe me, I sat at my desk at work, after work, many, many, many days crying and rewriting my thoughts on paper as to what I would say, but I needed help. I needed some help to keep the home. I had 2 daughters yet living with your 2 sisters, and I didn't want to lose our home. Went to the president of the bank, and he was amazing. Yeah. I found that there are truly amazing people in high places. And when you strip yourself of all pretenses and just bare your soul and say, I need some help, temporary, part-time help, there are a lot of people willing to help, as was in my case.
I didn't remember that until you just brought that up. But I want to make this point too, is that there's a difference between going in and throwing yourselves at the mercy of somebody and just, wailing and crying and saying, you don't know how bad it is and things like that. And coming in prepared. You came in extremely prepared.
I sure did.
But the other part of that too is I don't know that you were really in a super healthy place to be able to go through paperwork,
I
and
wasn't.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I remember
Yes.
one of my older
He
brothers
did.
helped you,
Was
and he
so
was incredible, and
wonderful.
he's a book
Was
nerd.
awesome.
You
He
know,
was fantastic. His first words to me were, though, I don't think this is going to work. And I
Yeah.
said, it has to. And he went with me. So I had that strength with me.
but there was a strategy to it,
There
and I think
was.
that's
It was
what was
well
that's what was
planned.
really
It was,
important.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
had the courage to do it, and then you had somebody
Yeah.
stand beside you who could
Yes.
say, okay, let's put numbers down on paper, and
Yep.
let's just. He went back and looked through bills, and
did. He
and
did.
he analyzed it, and it's something I couldn't do because I'm
He's-
just not that organized.
Well, he is, thankfully.
But he has that gift, and he helped
Yes.
you with that,
And there are
I think
people,
that's so
if it's
important.
not someone in your family, there are others
Absolutely.
who have that gift. Seek, ask their help. They
And they're
will
willing to
you.
help.
And they are willing to help. Yes, absolutely. And you're right. It wasn't a pity party. It was when I approached the president of the bank. Here's the plan that I think I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Will you give me enough leniency during the next couple months to work my way to this plan? Absolutely was the answer.
Yeah.
Yes. I also called, I had a credit card debt. I called, which that was scary for me to do that, and worked out a payment plan after I had help with a budget. I went from two working, people to one. It was
Mhm.
now me. And believe me, we were crunched before, and now
Yeah.
it was only my income. But there again, they'd rather you make payments than claim bankruptcy.
Right.
So I was willing to pay off my debt. And by the way, everybody, I cut my credit card in half, and I have not used any. It taught me a lot of lessons about money and credit, and I don't want to ever get in that position again. Food and clothing, there are all kinds of ingenious ways we can save money. There are food banks out there that will help. I never had to do that. Thankfully, I have a lot of land where I live, and I like to grow food. We have I do canning and preserving, so I had food that helped us get through. For some, they're not that fortunate, but there are food assistance programs and whatnot, and that makes it very practical for us. The biggest thing is finding a place to live if you have to leave your home. I was blessed and fortunate enough that I already had a job. I didn't have to seek out, a job to keep our home. However, there are programs that will help with that, with housing. I wish there were more. I wish churches were more actively involved in helping spouses of those who have had to leave because of abuse. I think it's my personal opinion, my strong opinion, churches should have a plan in order to help for 6 months or a year. Excuse me.
Or at least coordinate with homeless shelters that are already
Yes.
there, because like in our town we have
Yes.
we have the Next Step Center, which is a homeless
Right.
shelter, and they already have, they have the paid staff, they have the process, the
right.
intake process, they have the screening process.
United Way also locally helps with
Yeah.
that, which is awesome. Now, of course, we've been dealing with this coronavirus, and a lot of things have been shut down. That's where churches, if they have these resources available and know of them, they can help interim, until things get up and running again.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that we can do, speaking from our experience as well, is to really partner and network with organizations that, both secular and
critical.
non,
Yes.
partner with organizations and network with them, and even give them funding, help
Yes.
fund them.
Yes.
Because when we do it ourselves, I know, we run into several problems with, there are people who live off of the system.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah. You
unfortunately,
have to. Yeah.
we have quite a few who make a living, and they work very hard. Honestly, they probably put 50 plus hours in a week. And I think and they're living off of this system. They're career
Well, they bounce
people
from
who
church
live
to
off of the
church,
system.
And they know how to do it. Yes.
We're not talking about those people,
No.
but there are programs out there, and I think when churches try to do it themselves, especially smaller churches,
much.
we don't have the resources
No,
to
it's
do
too
it. We don't
much.
have the budget to do it, but we can network, and there's no excuse not to. To just throw our arms up and say,
Yes.
well, we're a small church,
And
or
we can't do anything.
we don't have the resources. That's not acceptable.
Network, know your local resources, and have a list prepared and ready to give.
Yeah.
That's something I didn't have. I did seek out a therapist, and she's the one that told me about help with electricity, help with fuel oil, help with food. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have all kinds of programs. There's
Yes.
LIHEAP for heating in
I
the
had
winter
never
here.
heard of
All
that.
kinds of programs.
And unless you're in a position where you've previously needed that, you wouldn't know.
Right?
But if every church had a list, an active, updated list of resources for spouses, man, that would be great. That
Yeah.
would be so awesome.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, and I don't know how we're doing on time, Jimmy, that's how I did it and am doing it.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to those who have been fearful about leaving, trust me, it is scary, but it is good, because at the end of the day, there is peace.
Yeah.
And you can't put a dollar amount on peace. I can't tell you how many different people have said to me, "You've changed." I just had a daughter tell me that the other day. She said, "You have really changed." She said, "You're so much calmer and nicer."
I would agree.
I know. And I said, "Thank you." Gee, was I that bad? She said, "It was pretty rough for a while." I agree. The stress of living with an abusive person is horrible.
It is.
There is not joy. There's nothing joyful about that. It's hard, very hard on you in every aspect. But when that is removed, there's peace.
Yeah. I would confirm that 100%. And
Yes.
I would say, as somebody who's close to you, who's walked through a lot of this crap
Yes.
with you,
Yes.
it's nice that every single time we get together, every time our kids go to your house,
Wow.
every time you come
nice.
here,
Yes.
every time we go anywhere,
Yes.
it's always peaceful. It's always joyful.
is.
We're always smiling. And
Yes.
it's nice.
It's wonderful to have that peace. Are there money issues yet? Sure. I think everybody has that for the most part. But that's not the big thing in life. The biggest thing is this peace.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when you can close your eyes and say, "Thank you, God, for another day of peace," everything is worth it for you and for your children, for your entire family. So I encourage you, if you are struggling with the decision, it is worth it. And do you want to add anything to that, Jimmy?
No, I think you said it all.
Oh, okay. Well, should we do it? Yeah.
Yeah. No, before you give a very good and important truth bomb, I would
Okay.
just say this lady right here is living, breathing proof that you can live under the thumb of an abuser. You can walk in the aftermath of the abuse that this person left behind. And you can make it out on the other side, a whole person, a happy person, a healthy person. We won't talk about your birthday coming up here. You can even be a seasoned person and still maintain your youthful looks. And
Wow.
you wear this well,
I feel wonderful.
and it's very important for people to know you don't have to live as a broken person and feel abandoned and feel useless and feel despondent. There is life on the other side of that.
There is life on the other side. It is good life. It is wholesome life. It is a happy life. It is a life of peace. For those of you living with abuse, you understand what it's like to not have peace. Just picture in your mind every day living in peace. That's what you will eventually have.
Yep.
The truth bomb is brief, but it's powerful. When you do the right thing, the help will come. You can do this.
Yes. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in this week to this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron. And check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.